it's almost like wealth is a like sugar. It gives you cavities.
Yeah, it
Wealth
can. You gotta
corrupts.
be careful with it. Yeah.
It corrupts because it seems like it leads to this insatiable desire for amassing and accumulating, which is interesting.
Phails at philosophy.
That was what we shifted from when we talked about wealth of a nation.
Right.
This amassing and hoarding of
Right.
wealth. And Adam Smith shifted that to, no, it's actually productivity. And now we have...
And trade.
And trade, yeah. This it's a back and forth. It's a fluid environment. And now we have, when you have a lot of wealth and greed being the underpinnings of your kind of way you move through the world, now you're hoarding and you're kind of like walling off your wealth.
Right.
And I think about the way Trump is, if all these things are right, if all the stuff I've heard in documentaries about Trump, he would make deals that were maybe probably in his best interest, but seemed like they were okay for all the parties, but then he wouldn't even honor his side of it by not paying the people.
That's what I mean,
what he agreed on.
He doesn't even play by the rules.
And then he would utilize, he kind of would, because then he would utilize the legal system. He would pay lawyers.
Right.
Instead of honoring the four corners of the document the agreement, he would, use lawyers to figure out how to navigate it. What I'm thinking of is one of the things where he or his family or his business owned these rental places, and they wouldn't rent to minorities.
Right.
They would tell them, hey, we don't have any available. And a white family would come and he would say, okay, we do have them available. Or they would say they cost this amount for a minority and then a different amount for a white family. And then they were put to task by the government for those behaviors.
Right.
And he fought and he fought and he fought and he never pled guilty.
Right.
He settled.
Right.
But part of the settlement was never admitting guilt.
Right.
So there's this part of utilizing the legal system, which is kind of playing by the rules. I mean, that's the rules of but you're sidestepping, I think, accountability. You're sidestepping that responsibility to the well-being of yourself and others.
Yeah. And, I think about my experience as a tabletop gamer, both role-playing and board gaming, is there's a certain kind of player who's super competitive and they say they're trying to play by the rules, but really what they're doing is just constantly trying to find the holes in the rules.
Yes.
To get ahead.
The loopholes.
Right? That's not playing by the rules. That's not operating with integrity. That's a form of really attacking the integrity of what always has to be a relatively... no rule set is going to be perfect for every situation.
They're just figuring out where there's some gray area in the rules and how can I take advantage of that. And then what you end up with is a game that has to have so many rules just to accommodate all those folks.
Right. And that's its own corrupting thing, because then it rigidifies everything and makes it hard for people to act.
Or it's not fun anymore.
Right. Or you have no ability to manage that, and then you just have these people who ride roughshod over everybody else. And
that's where we get back to this
it's corrupt
character.
Yeah.
You need everybody to understand the gray area and the intent, because you have the words and then you have the intent of the words. But folks can look at it and say, hey, these words don't necessarily codify what I'm doing. Then we can argue the interpretation.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's there's this interesting part at the beginning of the chapter where it's just very brief. He talks about kind of the Buddhist concept of self, right? The negative self here, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is identifying yourself with what you can acquire and own in the world, right?
Right.
Right. Where you're just kind of you're getting your sense of who you are and your value out of this ability to
amass
the world, right?
Yeah.
And it's wealth is the way we're thinking about it, but I think in the fundamental concept, it's amassing control of the world. It's our desire to project ourselves out and say, this is mine.
Yeah.
This is me, right? This is my brand. This is like all the things that to some extent we've developed as strategies of productivity, right? Like you were saying at the beginning, of industriousness.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting way to relate to the world through ownership. And I wonder if there's a way that we restructure through really looking at the world through responsibility, right? Recognizing that when you play the game, whatever game it is you're playing, whether it's a game at a tabletop or the game of life, part of your responsibility is to be part of the community that holds that in place for everybody to play, right?
Yeah.
And part of that is approaching it with a real honor to the space as a shared space. It's a responsibility to the world around you instead of an ownership around you. You're still projecting yourself out into the world, which may be at odds with kind of what the Buddhist teaching might be, which does seem to be more even just losing that level of identity with things. But yeah, so going back, yeah, you have to, there's all these moments in life, right, where you have that point where you're like, I could get ahead if I just bent the rule this
Well, we
way.
see so many people doing that.
Right.
That over and over and over.
Well, other people are getting away with it. Why shouldn't I?
Well, it seems like that's one of the ways to get extreme wealth.
Yeah.
The Ponzi schemes and the folks that don't follow the rules.
Yeah.
How have we come to be?
But then what is your wealth? I mean, that's the Buddhist question. Like, who are you and what is your wealth then? Like, sure, you have
a lot. Is it your character?
You have a lot of stuff, but yeah, then who are you at the end of the day? And why should you value yourself? Like if the whole game started because you're trying to feel value for yourself and you decided to value yourself because you can get a lot of shit at the expense of other people that produces real harm in those people, why should you value yourself?
Isn't that industrialization though? The idea of industrialization is I can put capital somewhere. I can take advantage of low cost of labor, get them to work. I can make an extreme amount of money on top of what their labor provides. And then, I gather more and more wealth.
Yeah, that's how it's evolved historically, but that doesn't have to be industriousness. Like an industrialization of a process is really about organizing the process to take advantage of efficiencies, right? And you can take advantage of efficiencies without necessarily having to exploit labor. You still get those efficiencies, you just don't get them at the rate you do, right? So if you move from a craft process to an industrial process, right, through assembly line,
right,
variety, through basically designing the process by which you produce a good,
right,
and building efficiencies into that process through scale, etc.
Industrialization, yeah.
You can do that and still treat the labor as human beings.
I don't think so. You're putting human beings in a veritable hamster wheel in order to get what you're doing. You have someone go and do the same thing over and over again, day after day. Their life is that 8 hours, 5 days a week. Yeah. I don't think that's no human being should be doing that.
But that's how we have taken on industrialization as a world. Right? We've taken, just because historically that's how we did it doesn't mean that's the only way it can be done.
You're saying that that's the way America's done it, or that's the way
industrialization
industrialized world has done it,
because it came out of a situation in which, part of it is it came about in a period of time when in Europe, where Europe had just refined an entire framework for feeling good about exploiting other people through colonialism. Right?
Yeah.
And so, right. And if you look at the industrialization of Europe and the United States, to some extent, it's just hey, this level of exploitation worked great in the colonies. Let's bring it home and exploit our own people in the same way. It's just like,
ugh, it's gross. It's gross.
But I guess at the end of the day, I don't think that's about capitalism versus socialism or industrialization versus, I think to some extent those frameworks are important, but what's more important is the fundamental question of how are you treating the people you're working with.
Yeah.
How are you treating
How do you view them?
the people that are impacted by the things you do, even if you don't see them? Are you remembering that they're human beings?
Yeah.
Are you then designing for human beings and not just for product?
Right.
Right? It doesn't mean you can't include design for product and the efficiencies of product, but yeah, maybe 10% efficiency is what you get instead of 30% because you got to lose 20% to actually being a friggin' human being.
To giving the folks that are helping
Right.
you produce whatever you're producing a good life.
Right, exactly. So there's nothing good but wrong with generating wealth.